Welcome into Celtics Today. I am Will Scott. On today's show, we're going to be talking about some Celtics trade targets, guys that the C's can go after. Of course, last week they pulled off that huge trade, bringing Malcom Brogdon to Boston. Brad Stevens may not be done. Now, name a player that you want to trade for. Obviously, they have filled some of the team needs already by adding a point guard, by adding Danilo Gallinari, adding some depth down low, but perhaps they can still get a little bit better maybe by adding a shooter off the bench. Go down, let me know what player you want the Celtics to trade for. Terrance Ross is a name that has been linked to the Celtics a lot, someone who Orlando could look to move. He's heading into the final year of his contract with the Magic, and his $11.5 million salary fits in to the Celtics TPE. They still have some TPE wiggle room, I guess you could say, because that Brogdon trade was not a TPE trade. They had to clear cap space to make that happen, which is a reason they shipped all those players to Indiana. Now, back in February, he was linked to the Celtics during the trade deadline. The Boston Globe reported that Boston was working on a trade. However, that trade never happened. Here's what he did last season in Orlando. 10 points a game, 2.6 rebounds per game, 39% from the floor. He was decent, but definitely not the best version of Ross we've seen in the league. I have mixed feelings about bringing Ross in, but I wouldn't be shocked if the Celtics do this because it does fit in to the trade player exception, TPE, and that basically means that the Celtics could make this move without having to worry about salary cap. When they traded for Brogdon, Brogdon's salary was above the $17.2 million TPE that they have from the Evan Fournier trade, so they had to ship a lot of players back to Indiana. You could trade for Ross without having to worry about the salary cap. Some other guys we're going to talk about on today's show do not fit in to the $17.2 million TPE. And let me tell you, if the Celtics make a move, we're going to talk about it. Subscribe to stay up to date on Boston Celtics news. We're nearing 11,000 subscribers. I want to get there by the end of the day. Go down, hit that big red subscribe button. Help me show my bosses at Chat Sports how legit Celtics fans are. Another guy we're going to talk about is Eric Gordon. He does not fit into the Celtics TPE. He has a $19.5 million salary. That's certainly a lot to pay for a guy coming off the bench, but he would be great off the bench, and this guy needs to get out of Houston, man. The Rockets are not a contender. They're not going to be a contender for a long time. Gordon would fit best on a contender like the Boston Celtics. He was really good last year in Houston, one of the bright spots on a pretty bad Rockets team. Shot over 41% from three, shot 47.5% field goal percentage, averaged 13.4 points per game. I really like EG. He's been a solid player throughout his entire career, and I think he'd be a great fit on the Celtics. You need, I still think, maybe some shooters off the bench. Gordon would be a reliable three-point shooter that you can bring off the bench. I really like the idea of bringing him to Boston. Now, if you had to pick one to trade for, who would it be? Would it be Terrance Ross, or would it be Eric Gordon? Type TR for Terrance Ross, or type EG for Eric Gordon. The thing with Gordon is that it wouldn't be a TPE move. The Ross move would be a lot easier to make. That means it would be more likely. But still, pick a player you want to trade for. Type TR for Ross, or type EG for Gordon. KD, we got to talk about him. A trade target for the Celtics. He has not been dealt. A week after requesting a trade from Brooklyn, it was the day free agency started, hours before free agency opened, and he sent shockwaves throughout the league requesting that trade from the Nets, and the Celtics have continued to be one of the teams linked to Durant. In fact, whenever NBA analysts are talking about who can offer the best package, a lot of them are saying the Celtics. Here is what you would be getting in Durant. I understand he is 33 years old. However, he is still a top 2, top 3 player in the league. Nearly 30 points per game. That was his best scoring production season in several years. 7.4 rebounds per game, 6.4 assists per game. Shot over 50% from the floor. My goodness, if you add this guy, I think you win a championship next year. Here's what Brian Robb of MassLive said. The longer it takes for a resolution here with Durant, the better news it could be for a team like the Celtics, who seem unlikely to get involved now. Assuming the Nets ultimately do trade for Durant, the fact that they are prioritizing players as much as picks should weaken the odds of their trade partner having enough left on the roster to remain a true contender, especially in the Eastern Conference. Here are the odds if you want to bet on KD's next team. So the Suns right now are still the betting favorite to land him. The Nets have gone from like plus 1,000 to plus 250 in the last couple days. The Raptors remain in pursuit of Durant. However, they're apparently unwilling to give up Scotty Barnes. And then if he gets traded to the Warriors, I'm literally not watching the NBA anymore. Miami Heat have certainly fallen, at least with the odds makers. Then you got to go all the way over here just to find the Celtics on the next page. So the Celtics right now, plus 3,000 behind the Bulls, the Blazers, the Pelicans, and the Sixers. I think the Celtics have much better odds than that. I think that that has pretty decent value. I don't see the Bulls trading for him. I mean, maybe the Blazers or the Pelicans are a dark horse, and then the Sixers, you heard that report that Joel Embiid apparently has interest in playing with Durant, but I don't know if the Sixers have that package to give up. I don't know if they'd want to part ways with Maxey. I'd be surprised personally if Brad makes this move because I think that the Celtics feel really good about where they're at right now. You just traded for Malcom Brogdon. When I was putting together my perfect Celtics offseason plan, which, by the way, is up to 23,000 views, thank you to all of you, I said trade for Malcom Brogdon. I didn't say trade for Kevin Durant. With this current group right now, I believe the Celtics are going to win the finals next season. Now, yes, if you trade for a player like KD, that would greatly improve those odds, but then you'd have to part with maybe Jaylen Brown, which I have very mixed feelings about, and I know all of you do as well. That being said, again, I'd be surprised if Brad made this move. I think he feels pretty good about the group he's put together. Just get a backup center on the roster and maybe trade for a shooter like Ross or Gordon, and I'll be feeling really good about the C's chances for 2023. The last trade target we're going to talk about is Matisse Thybulle. He is one of the biggest names that have been in NBA trade rumors. He was named to the All-NBA defensive second team the last 2 seasons. And hey, the Celtics are all about defense. You could bring this guy in, kind of help your identity as a team on the defensive end. Thybulle last season did this in Philadelphia, 5.7 points per game, 1.7 steals per game. So he's not a great scorer, not an elite shooter by any stretch of the imagination, but my goodness, he is one of the best defensive players in the league. And you heard J.D. Davison the other day at his press conference talk about how he was excited to get drafted by the Celtics because he knows that they're a defensive team. He says he knows the Celtics have the best defensive team in the NBA, and he prides himself on his defensive ability. Thybulle kind of the same way. He's a defensive-minded player. Now, did you make it this far in the video? If so, type squad down in the chat. I'm going to be giving some shout-outs on a future show. Go down and type squad. We really appreciate you watching today's video. Dennis Schroder is not a trade target, but I still want to talk about him. He is a free agent. He played for the Celtics last season, was pretty good, averaged 14.5 points per game. He was traded to Houston at the trade deadline. Here's what he did last season for the Rockets and the C's. 13.5 points per game, 34% from 3, 4.6 assists per game. I really like Schroder. I really like what he can do offensively. I liked him on the Celtics last year, and I haven't seen anybody talking about this guy. I mean, my goodness, you should bring this guy back. You'd be able to get him for very cheap. He could come off the bench, play the same role he did last season. You wouldn't have to give up picks to get Ross or Gordon. And yeah, Gordon would probably be a better option than Schroder, but I would rather have Dennis Schroder than Terrance Ross on this roster. I think the Celtics should at least consider it. Now, they just traded him away, so I don't know how likely that is that Brad Stevens would pick up the phone and call this guy. But hey, it's worth noting he's still out there in NBA free agency. Thanks for watching Celtics Today. Always appreciate you watching. We're the fastest growing Boston Celtics channel on YouTube. If you haven't already, go down and subscribe. We've added over 2,000 subscribers in the last 2.5 weeks.